My question is on the college fees. You know, Minister, that there was a problem already in terms of college fees, that we have the highest fees in Europe. Indeed, there are many countries, Austria, Denmark, Finland, Sweden, Greece, who have no fees at all. So it's in relation to the high fees, but also in terms of the fees that are being charged this year. And many students feel that it's grossly unfair to charge the same fees. Why not availing of the same campus facilities or the same facilities on it? So can we have a reduction in fees?
Thanks very much to Deputy Conway Walsh. Of course, one of the few jurisdictions that has higher fees would be in Northern Ireland, so I presume the same logic would apply in terms of wanting to see a reduction of fees in Northern Ireland, where you're obviously in government and where the fees are £4,395 sterling per year, and students therefore are leaving colleges in Northern Ireland heavily indebted through a student loan system that I view as wholly unfair. Under the Department's free fee scheme, the Exchequer provides funding towards the tuition fee costs of eligible undergraduate higher education students at an average cost of €6,500 per student. Students do pay a student contribution of €3,000 per annum. It can be paid in instalments. But importantly, and rarely commented on, the government pays the contribution in full or part for an estimated 44% of all students eligible for free fees funding through SUSI. So 44% of our students are either having their contribution fee fully paid or partially paid for by the government, and there's an estimated cost of that of €180 million for 2019-2020. In addition to this, student contributions are also funded by the state. In addition to the student contribution fees funded by the state, we're also funding €340 million in additional funding through the SUSI grants in 2019 and 2020. The Programme for Government does commit to develop a long-term sustainable funding model for higher level education. In addition, I intend to specifically examine student supports to ensure all students have access to educational opportunities and supports that will help them to fulfil their potential. While the balance of costs and benefits of higher education will be considered as part of that reform of higher education funding, the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic, which in fairness Deputy Conway Walsh is right to raise, it does have an immediate burden on students, and that's why we have announced €168 million in funding to support the sector, and included in that is a doubling of the Student Assistance Fund from €8 million to €16 million, a €5 million fund for mental health supports, and a €15 million fund for technology supports to purchase laptops for students. So I accept we have a lot more to do in terms of removing cost as a barrier on this island, and I do intend to take a number of steps to try and help remove those barriers.
Yes, Minister, I welcome the fact that you acknowledge that fees are too high here as they are, and indeed I agree they're too high right across the island and they need to be reduced. Comparing the two jurisdictions, I think when we don't have control as of yet of the Exchequer finances in the north, I think is uncomparable. But when we look in the recent survey that we did with students, 70% of them are telling us that they have lost employment opportunities. And I think that has really exacerbated things this year because they don't have the jobs now that they used to have. I know one of my questions has been transferred to the Department of Social Protection in relation to COVID payments for students. Will they continue, and will they be eligible for those fees? If we were to have a reduction of fees of, say, even to buy €500 this year, it would cost £39.3 million. And I think these incentives, while I welcome all of the announcements that you have made, I think they need to be real tangible things that students can access, because too many people are excluded from SUSI as it is, and they have huge bills coming in the door next week. Thank you.
I do agree with you. I mean, it is a reality that there are opportunities that would often be available to students that will not be available in the current college year, the most obvious being employment opportunities. Many students working part-time to supplement the cost of living and the cost of going to college. That is why we did make a decision to make a targeted intervention this year in doubling the Student Assistance Fund. This is the fund that's available through Access offices in colleges and universities around the country for students who fall on hard time in addition to SUSI. It's why we also made sure that there was a flexibility in SUSI in terms of a sudden change in a family's income arising from COVID. It's also why we changed the rules in relation to supports for people in direct provision to access SUSI grants as well. But be very clear, I fully accept that there's a lot more that needs to be done here. The Programme for Government talks about the need for a fundamental overhaul of the student support system, and that's something I hope we can advance in the coming months.
Thank you, Minister, for that. In relation to the Student Assistance Fund, I would ask that that be made very accessible, because often you find that funds are there, but when people, particularly people who may appear on the face of it to have a gross income that should sustain their needs, it doesn't do that. And I'm talking particularly around frontline workers, maybe where you have 2 frontline workers in one family, and yet they cannot afford to send their students to college. I think the only way to do this is to look at the fees in themselves and to have them reduced, rather than to have the different packages available. Sometimes it can be so complex that people cannot get access to them. But also, the colleges really need to look in terms of what they're providing this year and the cost of those provisions. And of course it relates to the gross underfunding of institutions as it has been. So they're trying to get students, I suppose, to carry the can for the chronic underfunding within the institutions themselves. And I think there's a gross unfairness in that, and there's an unaffordability that really concerns me.
Yeah, and I actually very much welcome the survey that you did, Deputy Conway Welsh, and I think it is important to hear directly from the voices of students. In 2015, we were, as a state, investing about €1.4 billion of Exchequer funds in higher education. It's now risen to 1.8 billion. When you add in the SUSI costs as well, it goes to above €2 billion. Yes, we do need to do more. The Programme for Government commits us to doing more. I think when we look, though, at the SUSI support schemes, and I remember when SUSI was introduced, I think it did bring about a lot of improvements in terms of removing the fragmentation that existed around the country. But there are anomalies there that we do need to address, and these all have to be part of the normal budgetary process. But I'll give you one example. The idea that SUSI doesn't take into consideration childcare costs could present a barrier to many families, particularly perhaps one-parent families, in terms of accessing education. Reforms that we do need to bring in relation to postgraduate supports and to part-time learners. So that's to give you an indication of my thinking as we approach the budgetary process this year and the lifetime of the government.